Hello guys, and welcome back to another update. In this update I have done quite a lot of work. So much work that my hands are literally sore from programming. And the amount of things I could literally go on about that I've done. But as you can see, I've done a massive graphics overhaul. This is basically what the game is going to look like, or very, very close to it. There may be some minor tweaks with the shaders and lighting, such as the metallic and roughness and stuff like that to be done. But generally speaking, this is pretty close. So let's talk about some of the things I've done. First and foremost, you may see a little bit of popping there. I've done at least one lot level on these ships. So they are distance lotted. To get the frame rate this high with 100 ships of this quality, I have been doing a lot of optimization systems. And also the ships are now colored by team. So you can see the icon on the indicator there indicating blue team, but also the ship itself is colored properly. Red team. I have also done some work to the shield systems. I have made bullet impacts more accurate because they now hit actual mesh colliders that follow the ships that are using the same mesh as the ship model and not a convex collider, which isn't accurate at all. As you can see, the graphics, I have done a lot of work. It's actually quite complicated to get it to where it needs to be, where you can see there's the explosion effects that are emissive, and I'm using sprite renderers instead of particles, which is much more performant, and I plan on doing that in the game. Because of the scale and scope of the game, I have to basically make some sacrifices. I mean, I could use particle effects, and I may go ahead and do that if I have the time. A lot better quality particle effects instead of just sprite sheets. But you definitely have to have a better rig, a high-end rig to run it. And so I could do a graphics quality low-high settings and then use either swap it out between sprite sheet particles and actual particle effects that would be pretty intensive. Now, I do have, with that said, I do have the particle effects limited because every bullet impact, for example, especially with these high fire rate weapons like these point defense turrets that are mounted on the back of these ships, every single one of these ships has a turret on the rear of it that only targets within its angle. As you can see, it's locked in that position. It won't go any further. Let's see if we can find one firing. There's one firing. So whenever those bullet impacts hit a ship, it is a maximum amount of particle effects that will show up until they dissipate, basically, and disappear and allow the pool to repopulate. That's because, that's literally probably like 100 bullets right there. And if you had a impact effect from every single bullet, yeah, that's a lot of particle effects you'd be running. So now it's possible to have a ton of them, I think, using the sprite sheet renderer as opposed to something that has 20, 30, 40 actual particle images in motion. And also the rendering overhead you get from that, and also CPU overhead too. And I'm really happy with the graphics. I'm really happy with the emissiveness glow of the weapons fire, and that you can see it pretty well at a distance. You see, you can still see it pretty well at a distance. Now, explosion, bullet impact effects, and particle effects and things like that are lotted out at a distance. But like I said, later on I will add graphics controls for you to be able to change that if you want to see the battle in all its glory, if you have a rig that can handle running that. This station here, okay. So all of the areas in Galactic Armada, the star systems that will be on the board game map, will have a station in it. And this is a modular station, and the components will actually be added on by the player as they upgrade their orbital defense stations in each star system that they control. So they'll start out as a small little station, and then all the components will be added on, and they'll give various bonuses to the resources within the board game aspect, and also within the actual scene itself when a battle is engaged near that starbase, in the zone that that starbase is in. Oh, another thing I forgot to mention is if you look at the weapons fire, you can see that the bullets, what you're seeing here is they actually scale down as they reach the end of their lifetime cycle. And I tried a couple different techniques. I've tried using a transparent shader, and then changing the opaciveness of it to fade them out, but that didn't work very well. And also, it takes a lot more performance to render a transparent shader as it does an opaque one. And also, I made my own shader for the bullets, which is a very, very simple custom lighting shader, which is definitely more performant. And also, they don't have to be updated through material updates. So that system definitely works better to just scale the bullets down at the end of their life cycle, so they don't appear to be popping out of existence when they do die. And I'm pretty happy with the frame rate and the performance of the system right now. This does have 100 ships, and these are considered gunship class ships. They're bigger than a fighter, about twice the size of a regular fighter that the player will be flying in. Now, the player will be able to fly in some gunships and some larger class ships too, once the player flight controller is done and those ships are made. One thing I do have on my bucket list to do, which I haven't done yet, is you can see how this ship is targeting. It's a little bit off on its targeting vector. And one thing is it's not offset. It's basically straight from the center bound of the model. And I need to offset it by where the actual position of the fire points are. So it'll aim a little higher or lower depending on the position of the actual fire points relative to the center bounds of the model itself, or the transform that the ship is sitting in. See how it's shooting a little bit too low? If it was shooting a little higher and it was offset, it would actually aim a little higher and have better accuracy there and actually be hitting the ship. So targeting gets a little bit complicated to say the least, as far as doing all the work to be shooting at the proper vector point to actually have the AI ships hit their target with relative high probability. But the turrets, on the other hand, do usually hit pretty well, right, currently. One other issue you may see here is that when the shields are hit, the turret isn't actually part of the ship model, and I'm not really sure exactly what to do about that. Now, I could apply another shader to it and just have it kind of go off and kind of match the shield, but I don't know. it'll take a little bit more performance. You know, overhead used to do that. I'm not sure if it's really necessary to do that for turrets. I don't know. You guys might be able to talk me into it if it becomes a serious issue, but I got bigger fish to fry right now. I got so much other work to do. Oh yeah, I did add this in here, just for fun. Eventually, the hangar base may be somewhere that the player can land, and there'll be a table or a room where they can overview the battle and control the battle, and be able to watch it from outside the window if they want to. But the same panel that would be in that room on the table, the command post, will be available through a UI interface as well. So if the player's flying around in their ship, engaging in battle, fighting, and they need to issue a command, they'll be able to do that. Or if they just want to go walk around inside of a station, or even one of the battleships that has a hangar bay and a command ship that'll have a command room in it, that'll and allow them to just stand there and walk around and just watch the battle unfolding outside as they issue their orders, which will be kind of cool. Other than that, walking around in a first-person mode, there won't be any game to that other than the thrill of being on board one of your ships and watching the battle unfold outside the window and feeling the epic scale and scope of the battle. If I do add that, it'll be just for the sake of fun. What else was there? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the game Galactic Armada. I'm just going to talk a little bit about some things. I already told you that the zones within the star systems on the galaxy map that will be the board game will contain these space stations. Now, there's going to be 4 different types of resources, and those are going to be galactic credits, fleet supply, manpower, and research points. Those are the 4 resources that the player will consume on the board game and within the battle space. Now, I want to talk about supply a little bit because this is really cool aspect to the game. Is all the ships will use supply, and when I say supply is a blanket resource that covers ammunition and fuel, and also manpower, right? So it doesn't cover manpower. Manpower is actually separate, but what is going to happen is within your fleets, you're going to have supply ships. Now you may not have any, okay? But let's start over here. Ships, capital ships, will use supply over time, depending on how often they fire their weapons, how far they travel within the battle space. They will consume ammunition and fuel, and they will start the battle with a certain amount. Okay, and as their supply is used and drop, if you have supply ships or you're in a home territory, a home base, a zone you control, and you have a supply station module upgrade to your station, those modules and those supply ships will send out little courier ships that will resupply your capital ships. Okay, now the opposing player or AI team will be able to shoot those supply ships down. They'll be able to either destroy the supply ships themselves or even the couriers that are transporting supplies between your capital ships. And the amount of supplies that they transport will be based upon the transport ship itself and any upgrades that the player has purchased during their gameplay. And what happens is if you have no supply ships or you run out of actual supply units, then your ships will basically become stranded. If they run out of fuel, they won't be able to travel anymore. They'll become stuck. If they run out of ammunition, they won't be able to fire their guns anymore. Right? So it does put a time constraint on the player, okay, to accomplish their mission and defeat their opponent. before they run out of supplies or lose their supply ships if they fail to protect their supply ships within their fleet. Okay, so that's going to be one really cool aspect to the game, and it will also keep battles from going on endlessly or for very long periods of time. And so let's talk about fleets a little bit. So as far as the command aspect of the game, of the player, and also the AI, how they issue commands and how fleets will be structured, is you'll have a fleet, okay? You'll have battle groups, and within battle groups, you'll have squads, all right? And your fleets will have admirals that you'll be able to purchase and also level up if I get to doing that portion of it, okay? But they will have an admiral, and the admiral can be an AI where, so say for example, the player doesn't want to uh, control the fleet at the moment, okay? So he has an assigned admiral that he purchased with both galactic credits and manpower, okay? You'll have to have a certain amount of manpower to purchase a fleet admiral. Okay, and so if the player doesn't want to engage in the tactical command aspect of the fleet engagement, he can fly his ship around and have his admiral command the fleet. And there'll be different modes that you'll be able to set the admiral to, such as aggressive, defensive, uh, or something in between. There'll basically be modes or templates that the player will be able to select through, which are basically the same AI templates that the AI will be using, which I will be calling tactical templates. Okay. And the opposing teams will also be structured in the same way. They'll have fleets, they'll have battle groups, they'll have squads, and they'll have a commanding AI. Now, individual ships will have a fairly sophisticated AI too, okay, in their own right. And they'll be able to do maneuvers, different kinds of new maneuvers. They'll be template driven and driven by priority targeting. Okay, so whatever the ship is fighting against, it will start making decisions tactically about how to deal with that threat. And it will make decisions differently based upon the threat that it's dealing with. Now, with that said, the overall fleet commanding AI will be able to override individual ships. And I will be getting to doing just park it up here. I have a habit of moving the mouse around too much. Sorry guys. It's just I get that way. Okay. So I will be doing, what was I saying? Oh yeah, the UI interface at some point after I get all the weapon systems out of the way, I still need to do missile systems, and I still need to do energy and physics simulation weapons, which is the tractor beams and an energy shockwave cannon, which will actually push ships and apply various physics forces to ships and stuff like that. That will damage ships in a wave instead of just a straight line projectile. Okay, and there's also going to be explosive forces. Okay, so there's going to be missiles that cause explosions that put out physics waves, physics forces, and if you're nearby, it hits your ship, it could spin you out of control. Okay, and that goes for also AI ships too, and it will damage your ship. So those are different types of weapon systems that I'm doing before I move on to doing the battle group and the squad systems. Okay. And after that, I'm doing the UI system that will allow you to uh, display a mouse, okay, and right click on a ship, and it'll highlight the battle group. It'll highlight all those ships that are within that battle group, okay, and it'll also have a menu that will allow you to issue commands to the battle group or to the fleet, okay. And I'm going to spend quite a bit of time really simplifying this menu and making the UI very easy to learn and very easy to use. which is very important. Okay, I don't want to make the same mistake that they made in the X series by making the interface overly complicated, hard to understand. It needs to be very simple and very quick to learn. I mean, literally, you'll learn it in 30 seconds, maybe a minute. You'll have it down, and that's the goal, to make the game easy to get into and really fun to play, really engaging, especially on what I'm planning on building really well, which is the tactical combat simulation, the command of the fleet. And also, obviously, I'm going to do the space action shooter pretty well too, which is the flight simulator for the ship, the player flying ship around and shooting on everything and just blowing everything up with extreme prejudice. And there will be lots of stuff to shoot and blow up in this game. You will be very busy in these fleet engagements, especially late game when fleets start getting very large and there's a lot of reinforcements, reserves that will be spawning in too as ships get destroyed. Since there will be a cap on the amount of ships in a scene, if a player on the board game aspect sends a fleet that's larger than the cap, they'll have to choose certain battle groups to put in reserve. And once their overall fleet power drops, those reserve units will basically warp into the scene as reinforcements. Stupid fly. And so, what I'm really building is the game that I've always wanted to play. Okay, it's really the game I've always wanted to play. I really love like a lot of space games. I'm a big fan of space games. Okay, I love the X series games. Not really the last ones that they made, but X1, 2, and 3 had really good storylines and were really good games for what they were. But they started making them overly complex and too much focused on trading, which was really boring in my opinion. Okay, what I wanted to do was build a galactic empire and go wage a galactic war, right? And feel like I'm the admiral in command of these fleets. But they didn't. They never did it really well, right? And they had mods that came out, but it never worked really well. And anytime you had more than 20 capital ships, the system got so bogged down that you're getting like 20 frames a second. It just wasn't, the game wasn't designed for what they were trying to do, because it wasn't designed for galactic warfare, because they're running all those trading subsystems and economy systems in the background, right? Uh, in real time, it took up too much overhead to even come close to doing something like what I'm doing here. That's why the board game aspect to this game is going to be relatively simple, uh, because I can't, because of the complexity of these battles and the complexity of the AI. Stupid fly, gosh. Okay, so uh, I can't have some complex economy trading system running in the background. Okay, uh, just can't do it, uh, because the AI is going to be somewhat pretty sophisticated, and it's going to have a pretty decent CPU overhead, as well as all the targeting system for all these different turrets, okay, and all these ships, and the complex targeting and systems. All right, these ships, for example, right now there's 100 of them, and I've been running what, 140 frames. Okay, if I come out here, and I'm doing forward rendering, so if I look away, I actually get a higher frame rate, but I'm still averaging over 130 frames per second. Every single one of these ships has a turret, so that's 100 turrets, 100 ships with forward firing weapons, nearly continuously firing their weapons. You can see that I've really optimized the projectile system, the bullet projectile system even further. If you look at my active projectile count, going up and going down and remaining steady, right? So, and you haven't probably seen any big frame drops whatsoever in this video, which is a really good thing. But with that said, there won't be this many ships with this many turrets in the battles, most likely, because most fighter class ships, those are going to be the vast majority of the ships, okay? So there'll be 20, 30, even 40 capital ships, okay? But the vast majority of the ships will be fighter class, which won't have turrets. And capital ships themselves will only have up to a maximum of, say, 20 turrets, 20, 25 at the most on most capital ships. Some will have even fewer than that. So if I were to take these ships out and just put in 100 fighter class ships that didn't have turrets and just had forward firing weapons, my frame rate would probably double. It'd probably go up to about 250 frames per second, or even more than that. Anyway, guys, this video is getting quite long, and I would like to thank everyone who's watching for watching and taking the time and putting the interest into this journey of development to build one of the, I hope, will be one of the greatest space sim, combat, tactics, fleet command, and strategy games to come. I mean, this is what, if you want to conquer galaxies and you want to focus on epic battles and tactics and fleet command and get rid of all the junk that you find in these other titles, okay, that really shouldn't be there, you know, that just holds them back. This is going to be the game for you. And there will be eventually multiplayer. Now, I am building the architecture of the software with multiplayer in mind. However, with that said, things might have to be scaled back. There's a lot of projectiles going on in this scene. I'm not sure how a network will be able to handle this many projectiles. Is it possible? I don't know. I'm not an expert in multiplayer technology. I'd have to really do some research on that. As far as transmitting all the coordinates to everything in the scene to a server via the programming, obviously I can set that up and do that. Now, can the network handle the throughput of that? I don't know. But I do know that it will be possible to scale back the size of the battles for multiplayer. So that would be basically pretty easy by just putting a fleet power cap on how many ships you could bring into a battle, which would limit drastically the amount of projectiles and everything else that would be needed to be transmitted over the network. Of course, it would. I'm not sure if it would be as fun. I think it would be just as fun. It would just be a little bit smaller battles than what you see, what I'm testing right now with, you know, 100 ships. But anyways, next video, hopefully I got missiles going. I'm just gonna keep cracking, keep going, keep hammering out all these systems that need to be done. And I look forward to getting to doing squads, doing battle groups, then eventually issuing orders to them. And yeah, just so much to do. So much to do. But before all that, something I even forgot is the damage system, which is an obvious important system for actually recording the damage to the shields, to the hull, and then adding explosion effects and having ships blow up, right? Now, the ship explosion effects will be actual particle effects and not sprite sheet render. I'm going to make those look really good, and they're going to be random. So I'm going to have a bunch of random pulls. So every explosion will be somewhat different. And I plan on adding a physics effect to explosions of ships. So if you had a cluster of ships like this and one of them blew up, it's going to put out a physics shockwave, and it's going to throw these other ships and as well as damage them. So with that said, I also need to add particle effects to the ship itself to indicate a level of damage. Okay, so the player will be able to see that visually. There's going to be a hit point bar below the indicator icons of ships that tell you what their hull level is and their shield level as well. Maybe I don't know if I'll add shield level, but I definitely will add hull level to let the player know damage. But there also will be particle effects, like fires and different things and smoke, that will visually indicate to the player the level of damage of the ship itself that they're looking at. Of course, those things will be lotted out in the distance like everything else because of obviously the scale of this. You can't just have these particle effects running everywhere on these mini objects. Anyways, I could really go on for a while, but I'm gonna have to get off here and get back to work. Got too much work to do to get this game done in a reasonable time frame. And I'll talk to you guys later.